All right, guys, back here on the Fox 5 Live Zone. Now to a local story that's making national headlines. Yesterday, the Supreme Court listened to a group of parents challenging Montgomery County Public Schools' no opt-out policy for LGBTQ-themed books in elementary school classrooms. Now, the conservative judges, well, they showed skepticism towards the school board's rule, pressing the board's lawyer on why it isn't feasible to let parents opt out. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Jessica Lettingham. She is a federal litigator, criminal defense attorney, and happens to also be a Montgomery County resident. She joins us right here on the Live Zone. Jessica, thank you so much for being patient. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
I want to get to, obviously, the topic at hand in just a second, but as a federal litigator, would you like to comment at all with regard to what we just witnessed outside of West Potomac High School in Fairfax County? A number of parents crying foul, outraged. They want to see their children. The school is officially not on lockdown. However, it is still somewhat of an active crime scene. Do you want to speak to that at all?
As a parent, with my oldest being 14, so about to enter high school in Montgomery County, so I'm only 40 minutes away from what we just witnessed, it's pretty terrifying, and you would think that they would have better procedures for this. I mean, we have seen tragedies like this all over the nation, and I think it's time that we see every school have policies in place and are able to discuss the policies with the parents. I think we're having a huge problem with them not communicating what is going on. So it is time that schools have policies like that in place.
All right, let's move on to yet again Montgomery County Public Schools. Parents challenging the no opt-out policy. As you heard me make mention, the conservative justices showed skepticism toward the school board's rule. You, yet again, federal litigator, what say you with regard to what the justices had to say?
So I think we saw yesterday that it was not just the conservative judges that were leaning towards the side of the parents. We actually saw Justice Kagan leaning towards the sides of the parents as well. She is quoted to say, "I too was struck by these young kids' picture books and on matters concerning sexuality. I suspect there are a lot of non-religious parents who weren't all that thrilled about this." And then, add in religion, and that's, even more serious. So I can see this being a decision where it's 7-2. Maybe Justice Kagan would be concurring because she thought that the school board, that the parents were asking for something too vague. But I definitely see the justices going on side of the parents because it follows a trend that we have seen in that parents have the constitutional right to protect their child's religion. They are allowed to make sure that their child is being taught a certain way in public schools.
And I'm glad you touched on that, Jessica. Perhaps I put the cart before the horse, and I'm hoping in layman's terms. Explain what's happening here. I got to tell you, Jessica, I had to go back and read this at least 3 or 4 times before I fully understood what is unfolding right before our very eyes. So for the mom, dad that happens to be watching right now, they're still trying to wrap their head around what's going on. Do tell.
So it was for kids in pre-kindergarten, pre-K, all the way up to 5th grade. So any elementary school in Montgomery County. They distributed books to schools and told teachers that they could use these picture books in English, especially during the Pride Month of June, to teach students about reading. One book that is no longer made available but was to pre-K was called Pride Puppy. Other titles you saw was Prince in the Night. And, there was one where it was about her uncle marrying his boyfriend, Jerry. And so parents really had a problem with the fact that they could not have their students leave the classroom while these books are being read, while there is instruction being going on. And to make it even further complicated, a lot of people had issues with the fact that they would not even be notified about this. And I can attest to that. My child was in 1st grade. She was read a book like this last year. I had no idea until I asked her about this once I heard about the case. So they do not have to tell you, and the teachers do not have to use it. To make matters even more complicated and to add one more layer on there is that when kids ask questions after reading these books, teachers are supposed to say things such as, we should be inclusive of a man marrying a man or a woman marrying a woman, or Penelope thinking that she's a boy, and I have a friend like this. Now, these are great lessons. Even the conservative justices said this could be an invaluable lesson that we're teaching children. However, there are a lot of religions that have issue with those teachings, and we as the court have always ruled that we cannot, the state and government cannot intrude on the parent's constitutional right to raise their child a certain way.
And so with that being said, and now this actually being presented before the U.S. Supreme Court, the next question is, when should we expect their ruling?
So we typically see rulings in June, very rarely before that, so June or July. And as I said, I would expect to see this as 7-2 with Justice Kagan concurring, because she thinks that the injunction asked for by the parents is a little too broad.
All right. Yet again, we have been speaking with Jessica Lettingham, federal litigator, criminal defense attorney, and Montgomery County resident and parent. Thank you so much for being patient. We truly appreciate you coming on the live.
Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome.